Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm your host, Patty Farmer, and I'm looking forward to introducing you to today's industry expert. And I have to tell you, you're in for quite the treat. Make sure you have your pen and paper handy because this is going to be one for the group. So let me tell you, Tina Dietz is an award-winning and internationally acclaimed speaker, audiobook publisher, podcast producer, influence and vocal leadership expert who has been featured on media outlets including ABC, Inc.com, Huffington Post, and Forbes. Tina's podcast, The Start Something Show, was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 35 podcasts for entrepreneurs. Tina's company, Twin Flame Studios, amplifies the influence of leaders, experts, and companies around the globe. So welcome so much, Tina. I'm so glad you're with me today.
I'm happy to be here, Patty. Thanks.
You're welcome. I'm really excited. And I love the topic we're going to talk about today. We're really going to talk about the power of audiobooks. And I think that it is something that people don't really think about. They don't really understand it, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And they don't really understand why, if they are already trying to amplify their voice, how they can add it to their marketing strategy. And so I love that we're talking about this today. And so before we get started though, Will you tell us a little bit about your story and what got you to where this is the thing that you knew you needed to do?
Well, being a lifelong entrepreneur, I've had a lot of moments of this is the thing that I need to do. I think that one of the things that you and I probably would agree on is that as entrepreneurs, we have a lot of those moments. We have it's almost never a straight line between what you think you're going to do and what you actually end up doing. And I'm certainly no exception. So particularly when the pivot happened into audio was when I was already an entrepreneur. I had already been business coaching and had worked with more than 20 different industries in 8 different countries. And I was voice acting as a paid hobby for fun. Because I always say that I've never met a microphone I didn't like. It's one of my favorite things. Anything involving a microphone, since I came out of the womb, I'm pretty happy with. And I was taking some master classes in audiobook narration, thinking because I'm an entrepreneur, can't just have a hobby. Of course, I want to monetize it, right? And I had this moment, I call it my chocolate and peanut butter moment, when I was in the class and I realized, I said, wait, all of my colleagues, all of my clients are doing bestseller campaigns. They're all writing books. Why aren't they doing audiobooks? And I was seized by what Michael Gelber from the E-Myth calls an entrepreneurial seizure. And I started looking into why this was the case. I didn't know anybody who had done an audiobook. And that was the big pivot into developing Twin Flame Studios. We basically just found that nobody knew that audiobooks were an option, and it was a huge gap in the market. And I did some piloting. I did some research on what the market looked like, discovered all kinds of wonderful things. And once we decided to launch Done For You services and audiobooks, it took over the company, 75% of the company within a year.
Wow.
So yeah. And then I had already been doing, of course, the podcast was there already. And I loved podcasting, again, anything with a microphone. We saw some gaps in the market. We saw some ways that weren't being served well. And then that came next. And again, it just, we're Fortunately, I've spent 20 years trying to be in the right place at the right time and finally hit it.
I know, isn't that like so true? It's like, oh, I want to be a trendsetter, right? I love
Right.
that. One of
Yeah.
the things that I've heard you say that I thought was a pretty interesting statement was I heard you say that audio marketing is the most in-demand publishing format for nonfiction authors. So that's a pretty interesting statement. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, across the board for publishing, audiobooks have been the fastest growing segment of the publishing industry for half a dozen years now. It's over a $4 billion industry in sales every year, and it has experienced double-digit growth year on year for at least 6 years, possibly longer. We saw a huge change in the audiobook market when things went digital. And then when audiobooks became a household name because of the merger basically between Audible and Amazon. So Audible still has 2/3 of the market share in audiobooks. They're very challenging to compete with. There are a lot of other audiobook outlets, but Audible really does kind of have a lot of it locked down, just like Amazon has a lot of the book market locked down. So that is what made things so accessible, and the growth just went insane. I mean, if you think about it, we're listening to everything on our phones, and first it was 1,000 songs in your pocket, and then it was 1,000 books in your pocket, and now it's 1,000 podcasts and 1,000 audiobooks, and we just have this kind of insatiable desire to constantly have our entertainment and our knowledge at our fingertips, and audio is by far the most portable medium. So all of these factors put together have accounted for the tremendous growth in the audiobook industry in the last half dozen years, and there's no end in sight.
I really like that. And I think that I read that 3.5 billion audiobooks are in the industry and that they're growing 3 times faster than any other type of industry.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely 3 times faster. And audiobooks, if you average out across genres, do outsell ebooks. Also 2.5 to 3 to 1. Paperback is still king across genres. But in nonfiction, it's hard to say. The nonfiction research isn't quite as good as the research on fiction is, and it's just something that irritates me about the industry. But we do see a lot of consumption of audiobooks, particularly from the entrepreneurial world, from executive, C-level, director and above, because people don't necessarily have a lot of time to sit down and read. And even in this odd year that we're in right now, we're still seeing tremendous growth in audiobooks, audio formats, really across the board, because people are always looking to improve themselves. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for answers. They're looking to pivot their businesses. They're looking for help mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially. And having that helpful, intimate voice in your ear that is so helpful with an audiobook, combined with the portability factor, really makes it just a fabulous combination.
I really like that. And I think it's really interesting. So I have a few questions about who is it for? Because is doing an audiobook really for somebody who actually has a physical book? Is it something that somebody can do if they just do ebooks? Maybe they have some robust blogs. Nowadays people are focusing on shorter, and talking more in sound bites. But there was the time where people would have these really robust blog posts. So can all of those be turned into audiobooks? Is it really for somebody who actually has a book?
Well, we can kind of break this down because audio can be used in so many different ways. And I know we're focused on audiobooks specifically here. So I will speak to that first, but I also would love to just kind of, because you mentioned so many different ways of using content, repurposing content into audio has a tremendous value. So I'll touch on a little bit of that there too. And feel free to interrupt me with questions as we go along, because like most experts, I can go on until your eyeballs glaze over, and that's no fun for anybody. So
I'll try to keep
we'll see how far we get. All right, we'll go back and forth here. So specifically for the audiobook side of things, in order right now for self-published authors or authors who are going through smaller publishers, vanity publishers, hybrid publishers, and the like, basically anything outside of traditionally published work, you have to have some version of your book up on Amazon or another book outlet in order to have your audiobook specifically published. Otherwise, it just kind of hangs out there as an audio product instead of as a book. So it has to have an ISBN to hang on to, and the ISBN is the identifier number for your audiobook is attached to your regular book. So there are some changes in the market hopefully happening soon where you'll be able to do standalone audiobooks. But right now, the fastest path, the best path, and quite honestly, one of the only paths to get your audiobook done is if you have an ebook, a Kindle version of your book up on Amazon, and then you can use the self-publishing portal of what's called acx.com. It stands for Audiobook Creation Exchange. Or you can use a service like Findaway Voices to get your audiobook published. Those are the two major players for self-published authors. And we actually use both of those portals for our authors because unlike traditional publishers, we do not retain rights or royalties to any audiobook. So we do everything for our authors in their name and as an advocate to make sure that they get the most out of their royalties and they get the most exposure. So that is the best way to go ahead and get your audiobook done, is to have that version. But we can definitely touch on the other content repurposing because there's some great ways to use audio and audio products for those as well.
So an audio product other than an audiobook or a podcast?
Well, a podcast is, in and of itself an audio product, but what most people don't think about in terms of podcasts is, well, what kind of a podcast are you going to have? It doesn't have to be a weekly or a bi-weekly show based on an interview. They're wonderful. I love them. A lot of the shows that my company produces are just that, with one twist or another on them. But we've also produced limited series podcasts that are around a really specific subject and may only go 8 to 12 episodes. And if you think about the difference on television between a show that just goes on and on forever, weekly, your CSIs, your Law and Orders, things that are serials, right? Versus a limited series that may be based on a book or based on a true story or something of that nature. Those might be limited series on the television. You can do the same thing with podcasts. And that's where some of the things you mentioned, like long form blog posts, or maybe a series of interviews you did specifically for, say, a summit, could be repurposed into a podcast. Or on the B2B side of things, we work a lot in the B2B markets. If a company has done a whole bunch of branded research and a research report, and it's something they come out with every year, they can pair a limited series podcast following up on that report and on that big research project that they do every year to humanize it, to actually make the data richer, and then to help people actually use that information to their best benefit. So there's a lot of ways that we can use all of this audio content to our benefit in the content marketing side of things, as well as creating products from it.
I find that really interesting, and it does give me a couple ideas.
I'm sure it does.
That happens, right? But I think when I'm thinking about it, like when I think about an audiobook, I think about, like, I know what it was like to write a book, right? So when I'm thinking about it, it seems like, you have production, right? You have publishing, and then you have distribution. So what are the key differentiators between them?
Between production, publishing, and distribution?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. So on the production side of things, the big question to ask up front is going to be, well, first of all, am I going to do an audiobook? What are the pros and cons? And most of the folks we work with nonfiction audiobooks, and we work with people who are building a platform. They're building a message, they're building a company, they're building a business. That's very important to distinguish because you're using your audiobook in some different ways than somebody who is, say, a fiction author who is strictly looking to sell copies. They're selling copies, their income stream is just off the royalties. Nonfiction has a lot more options because in nonfiction, we're looking at your book and your audiobook, building your credibility. It can be in some cases like a business card or a calling card of what you do. It is an endless source of content to repurpose, and the audiobook is certainly no exception to that. So that's a really big distinction to make between the fiction and the nonfiction markets. The other thing is, are you going to narrate your own book, or are you going to have a professional narrator do it for you? So that is something that we certainly help you make that decision and make it as easy as possible. And then the production process is the recording, the fixing, the editing, the mastering that goes along with production. Publishing is what is going to be the outlet you're going to be doing. I mentioned ACX and Findaway Voices, and publishing your audiobook has some differences between audio and publishing an ebook or a hard copy book. So, for example, when you are pricing a Kindle book or a softcover book, you have free reign as to what you want to price your book as. In the audiobook markets, you generally aren't pricing your own book. You do have some control depending on what outlet you go through, but the audiobook individual platforms tend to take their own pricing models over what you want. And that is something that you have to take into consideration. So, for example, Audible will always choose their pricing over your pricing. And pricing is based on the length of the book. Everything on audiobooks is done by the length of the book. And a good formula to keep in mind around that is that 10,000 words equals about 1 hour of audio. So this is your publishing side. As for distribution, you can choose exclusive distribution through Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, or you can choose non-exclusive distribution if you have other outlets that you want to sell the book through. Let's say you do want to go through Findaway Voices. There are 30, 40 additional audiobook platforms you can submit your audiobook to, everything from libraries to international outlets and so on. It does impact your royalties. So again, this is something we have to walk you through, see what your goals are, see what your options are, and see what the best strategy is going to be for you. And that comes down to the distribution side of things. So those are the three components and the broad strokes of what's involved in each.
It's always really good to know that. And that's when you really do want to have an expert that can really walk you through that, because it can be very, very confusing. But I think that when you're really thinking about having an audio book or doing any type of audio marketing, the reality really is you're getting another platform, another way to reach people.
Yes.
And everybody has all types of different ways that they like to intake information. So what are some of the unexpected ways in which waves of public interest can benefit your business?
Can you expand on that a little bit?
I think that when you have different ways that you do audio marketing, right? So whether you're producing a podcast or an audiobook, what does that really involve? And there's always some unexpected waves, right? There's unexpected waves that people don't really think about. So, when you're going to do a podcast, you usually ask yourself the questions, why do I want to do it? What's my goal for doing it? And so I'm just kind of wondering that when somebody was thinking about doing some of these types of audio marketing, what are some of the unexpected ways that maybe they're not thinking about?
Oh, I see.
So they should be thinking about them when they're deciding, oh, maybe this might be an option for me.
Sure. Well, specific to audiobooks, I think that most authors don't think about how the audiobook or the audio content in an audiobook itself can be used in a number of different ways on the marketing side of things, not just, oh, hey, I've got another product. So most folks come to us in one of two places for their audiobook production. Either they have a launch coming up of a new book, or they want to breathe fresh life into an older title. I say to people all the time, if Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, had done an Amazon bestseller campaign, he never would have had a global empire, because what he had to do with his book was to continue to reiterate those 7 habits in so many different ways, across so many different platforms, across so many years. I mean, can you imagine how many times he had to say all of those 7 habits over and over and over again? I mean, what happens is for us as entrepreneurs and as authors is that we get tired of our work way before the audience does. And then we feel like, oh, people are going to get sick of it. There are over 7-8 billion people on the planet. No, you're getting bored of it. Your audience isn't getting bored of it. So when you have a product like an audiobook, your challenge, and this is something that we do help with, is, what are the different creative ways you can keep coming back to this content to position it in a new way, to use it in a new way, to have it benefit you in different ways. So we can take audio snippets from the book and create what are called audiograms. And for those who aren't familiar with audiograms, this is basically where you go to an app like headliner.app would be the place to go. Use their free version, and you can take audio snippets of your audiobook or any audio content and get it up there and turn it into video content. It's closed captions it for you. You can create graphics around it. You can even do video around it. And then it becomes a shareable asset on social media or on your blog if you'd like, or even to turn things into different snippets, say on a YouTube channel. It really just depends on how you want to use that content. It becomes shareable though, because video content, the most we tend to watch on a video, people tune out after about 2 minutes. But audio content is very different. People will listen to a podcast on average for 40 minutes. People will listen to audiobooks for even longer. So if you can go across platforms to help get your message out there and adapt your content, adapt what you've already created for those different platforms, in this case, audio, which we generally listen to for a long time, into video, which we only listen to for a short time, then you can gather more people to you. You can reiterate very pinpointed messages from your audiobook, little tiny 1 minute, 90-second teasers that can really help your audience learn more about you and learn more about your work. Even if you're working with a professional narrator, it's still the spirit of your voice, which is incredibly important to match up. It's something we have to handle in that audition process that we do when we're working with professional narrators. But it's your message coming through loud and clear. So it's things like that, creating a beautiful trailer for your book out of your audiobook content. It's something else that we do. It's a great repurposing of the material. Giving away chapters, using the gift codes that come with your audiobook. For example, ACX will give you up to 100 gift codes that you can use with your audiobook, and giving those away on, contests or to trusted colleagues to make sure that you get reviews on your audiobook, specifically in Audible, not just in Amazon, because they are two different platforms. All of these things need to be taken into consideration when you're looking at the total value of an asset like an audiobook. And there's even more. There's the bounty program. There's all kinds of additional ways to use podcasting and audiobooks together. There's a lot available to you.
I think it seems like it's just another way to leverage, right? Because that's what I talk about all the time. You're always
all the time.
To find what are all the things that you're already doing, and what are some new ways that you can leverage that content in a different way to expand your reach, right? So I think that is really important. Now, another thing, Tina, that I've heard you talk about is what you refer to as the intimacy factor, right? That audiobooks can deliver, and why it has a huge impact. So tell us a little bit about that intimacy factor. I love the phrase.
Yeah, audio has a tremendous intimacy factor. I had the pleasure of being the lead interviewer for a documentary on podcasting called The Messengers, which you can find, I believe, on Prime Video, and I might be on Netflix now, actually, as well as on what used to be iTunes. I can tell how old I am because I keep using the old names for stuff. But anyway, what I found by interviewing all of those podcasters, all different walks of life, totally, diverse, different parts of the world, every single one of them, and none of them knew each other, every single one of them mentioned the word intimacy in their interviews. And the intimacy of having conversations with people that you've never met, and the community that comes up around it. And we find this too with audiobooks. Any type of audio format is a very intimate format. And one of the reasons for that is because of how we are, as human beings, how we're wired. We're wired for storytelling. We're wired to take in oral tradition from generation to generation. I mean, this has been happening for thousands of years with humanity. If you even think about the term once upon a time exists in some shape or format in every single culture on the planet. And every single culture on the planet has storytelling traditions. So we've basically just digitized our oral storytelling traditions, the passing down of information from generation to generation or from across person to person. And so that has a deep neurological impact on our brains. And compounding that is the fact that most of us listen to these audio formats through earbuds, through headphones. And those sound waves are directly impacting our brain structures. It is a neurological impact. It's not just a marketing or business. We are really becoming voices in people's heads. That's what we're doing right now on this podcast. We're becoming a voice in your head. Ha ha. And that has a lot of power to it. It has a lot of impact in ways that we are not even necessarily conscious of. But after over time, you find a voice that makes you feel a certain way. You want more of it. You want more of that voice in your head. You want more of that wisdom or that, something that you feel that you need. And it creates a deeper relationship when you've got that multifaceted, multimodal approach. People will still buy the books. They'll still buy the ebook. They'll still buy the soft cover or the hardcover to make notes in, to put flags in, to highlight. All of those things still happen. But the audio allows someone to really make it through the book in a conversational way that allows you to develop a relationship even more quickly.
I love that. And I think it really, really is so true, because I know that I buy my content in more than one way for different things, right?
Yes.
So I really like to read my books on Kindle, right? Although I also purchase them for just that reason that you said, so that I could write in them. But I love taking my learning really in audio. So I think that really makes a lot of sense the way you said that. So Tina, what would you say is the biggest myth or belief that people have that stands in their way about audio?
Well, most of the time I find myself educating authors and even educating publishers in many cases on the audio market and on how audio really works. There's the biggest myth is probably the cost of it and the effort of it. And the third piece would be the accessibility of it. So audiobooks are one of the few things on the planet that the production cost has dropped more than 50% since 2009 because of all of the factors that we've, in the digital world that we've mentioned, because we're not distributing audiobooks most of the time on CD or in hard copy. That dropped the price tremendously. Being able to work with narrators or with our own home recording equipment dropped the cost tremendously. And then, of course, the cost of distribution has changed a great deal because we're not necessarily working through traditional publishers. So many things have changed. And so that cost factor has really made a big difference in the accessibility of audiobooks, not just for the producers, but also for consumers. I don't know if you remember, back in the day, if you went to go buy an audiobook that was like 6, 7, 10 CDs over at Barnes and Noble or Borders bookstore or one of those, I mean, they'd run $40 to $60 a pop. Now audiobooks are much more reasonably priced for people to be able to acquire. They're on par with a hardcover. They're on par with, in some cases, a softcover book. So it makes it a lot easier for people to purchase and to consume on the consumer side. And certainly it's made it a lot easier for everybody to get their audiobooks produced.
So if somebody was thinking about stepping into audio marketing, what are some of the questions you think they should ask themselves first?
Well, I think you want to take a bit of an inventory of your assets and see kind of what you've already got. Are you natively somebody who enjoys speaking? Do you have recordings of your speaking? Do you love to be on podcast interviews? And do you find yourself wanting to do more live speaking, and maybe you're not so loving of the writing side of things? On the other hand, if you're somebody who loves to write a lot, do you have a lot of content that you feel has kind of languished and maybe isn't being used to the best of its ability? You've got some great evergreen blog posts that are, 1,000 words long or something like that. Or, you've got a lot more content than you know what to do with. So getting present to what you've already got is a really important factor. And then you've got to look at your goals. Who are you trying to reach? Are you reaching entrepreneurs? Are you reaching executives? Are you in B2B? Are you in a market that, people love to listen to things? What are the best-selling audiobooks in the categories that you're in? These are just things that you can play with and explore. If you have questions or concerns about, what I'm doing, are people actually going to listen to it on audio? The truth of the matter is that across the board between audiobooks, podcasts, other audio forms of marketing, audio is, less expensive than video to get into. It is highly, highly consumed. And with the emergence of technologies like Alexa and Google Home and all of that, voice is continuing to grow in ways that we can't even predict yet in the technology. So, daily briefings are an area that, podcasting is extending into very, very quickly. And audiobooks, there are some rumblings that audiobooks may be able to follow on the heels of what's happening in that world, getting into people's day-to-day lives and in their homes to allow us to be able to reach people in markets and locations that, we're not even sure who it's reaching because there's so many people who are using so many different types of technology. That's not to confuse the issue, however. I know that can seem a little overwhelming when we think about the scope and the scale of it. But, we're entrepreneurs for a reason. We have vision. And if you are looking to have your voice reach more people and reach people around the world, and you're somebody who is thinking that, hey, I'd really like for more people to be able to consume what I'm doing in a different format or do more of what I love, if you're already doing a lot of speaking, then these are all things that are going to be well served in an audio format. Specifically for the audiobooks, however, the first thing you want to look at is sit down with your book and say, okay, do I want to be a voice in somebody's ear? And does this book lend itself to teaching somebody something that is going to be valuable for them to bring out into their lives or in their business?
Thank you so much. Man, I really love all this information and value that you were so generous in sharing. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, it's my
How
pleasure.
can my audience connect with you, Tina?
You can just go to twinflamesstudios.com. You find everything there. You can connect on social from there, find out more information about what we do. Certainly give a listen to some of the podcasts and audiobooks that we've produced, and feel free to reach out and explore.
I love that. And you came bearing gifts as well, which I love too. So tell us a little bit about the gift that you are giving to the audience.
Well, our primary goal is to make sure that when you go into something new, that you are well informed, that you have the power of knowledge behind you. And so we've put together the whole process of what it takes to create an audiobook into a guide, along with a bunch of our best practices, and much like we were just talking about, some of the FAQ kinds of things that come up along the way. And we've put that all together in a really handy guide, and it's totally free, and you can look over it, and that will get a lot of your questions answered about audiobooks and see if it's a good option for you.
I love that. And you're going to want to make sure that you check the show notes, because we're going to have the link to that right there, up front and easy for you to be able to get. So Tina, let's talk strategy. So this is the portion of the show. I mean, we've been talking about strategy the whole time, right?
Yes, that's true.
What I want to be able to say is, what is your number one marketing, media, and money strategy? So what's working right now? What would your number one tip be?
Oh, my number one tip is always to focus on relationships. They're the lifeblood of every business. Collaborations and partnerships, these are worth developing and investing in. Sometimes it feels like it's taking a long time, but if you get clear on what types of relationships you really want, then that's going to help you nurture those relationships. And then you're spending your time with those people and those organizations that you're going to be able to create beautiful reciprocity with and opportunities with each other. And that is always what has grown our company the most.
I love that. That is how I built my business. I think that relationships are the currency in today's business environment. So I love that. Thank you so much, Tina, for being here with me. I really appreciate it. Like I said, you shared your brilliance so generously, and I love that. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Patty. Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
And to the audience, thank you for joining us on the Marketing, Media, Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. And make sure you check out our sister publication, the Marketing, Media, Money magazine, where you can grab right now your free lifetime subscription at www.marketingmediamoney.com. And remember, make it a phenomenal day. And if for some reason your day isn't phenomenal, remember you have the power to change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.